Hello everybody, it's Joey here. So ArenaNet just put up the release page on their next patch. I already speculated a little bit on this on a previous video where we talked about what came with Halloween, and now they have filled in more details. What I'd also like to do is talk to you guys about the Krait. I'm going to give you a bit more lore since this update is very much geared towards that race, and until now I hadn't really realised that they were so untapped, right? I remember before launch reading about the Krait, but then if you think about it, at launch, what have we really had? What does the average player know about the Krait and their religion and their ways? Very little, and a lot of the stuff to do with the Krait is very dark. As I've mentioned previously, this is the most decidedly evil race ArenaNet really put out there. They once talked in like a behind the scenes section on their blog, particularly in comparison to the other races of Guild Wars 2, which tend to have shades of grey. But before we get started here, let me throw out there straight away what my theory of the next patch is going to be. I believe that what we're seeing here is the Krait opening a portal. What you're seeing on the trailer, that is a portal. This is a portal to another dimension where the Krait believe their prophets are waiting to return to Tyria, and with them they will bring an army to flood the world. That's my theory as it currently stands, and in the video I'll talk about their lore and go over their religion and stuff to see how I came to that conclusion. But first, let's have a look at the trailer itself and the release page. So anyway, on the releases page, the release is called the Tower of Nightmares. Some people speculated that perhaps this could have some extension or something to do with Halloween. Halloween, which will, as far as I'm aware, still be going on once this update comes out. But in fact, the two don't interact with one another at all. ArenaNet did release this awesome trailer, which I would have been playing in the background for you guys. This tower had actually already been data mined, and some people had seen over on Reddit. Like the data miners, I don't know how I feel about data miners, because like sometimes it's ruined the stuff, sometimes it's given us really interesting insights on various aspects of the game's development. But we have already seen this tower, but to see it in the trailer, actually there implemented in game, this thing is huge. This is a really big revamp to the area. I posited that perhaps this update would have a lot to do with underwater combat, or that ArenaNet would have trouble, trying to avoid falling into that trap if they weren't quite ready to tackle that aspect of the game. And it looks like the way they've done this is by just adding this huge new section. Now the question on my mind right now is this going to be a part of regular Kessex Hills, a part of the normal open world, or is this basically a new zone that we're getting that is only accessible from going into the middle of Viathan Lake as a part of Kessex Hills? So I have a hunch that they've put it in a different map, and that will probably get some people quite excited, because hey, this is basically a new map, potentially a permanent new map added to the game that won't necessarily be too huge. It's obviously some kind of a dungeony type thing. It sounds like an open world dungeon to me, and that's a premise that is incredibly exciting. All the dungeons we currently have, you're only there with 5 other people. What if the goal is to climb to the top of this tower, or indeed down to the bottom of this tower, because the Krait are underwater race, and yeah, it might stretch quite high into the sky, but maybe the heart of the Krait's weapon or whatever it is they're building for this release is actually low down. But regardless, if it's like an open world dungeon, like tower climbing, tower descending type area, that could be very interesting, that slowly you're working your way down and eventually you find some random guy on a curious place surrounded by traps, and you sort of team up with one another to save each other. That's a really interesting idea, and one I'm curious to see how they've done it. We will get more answers when they do their live stream a day before release that will be coming on the 28th, but so far that's my take of what they're going to be doing here. Also, a couple of other notable things about the trailer. Do the Krait look different to you guys, or have I just always vastly underappreciated how badass they look? Definitely that's a different skin, but the entire model looks really different on these Krait. Very cool looking. They even look a bit Naga-esque. They're a lot more streamlined and snake-like than we've seen the Krait be in Guild Wars 2 so far, because usually they're quite spiky with their armor and all their different ornaments on them. Very cool. And what you'll have to remember as well, guys, is from the first game, we actually know the Krait are like a shape-shifting race, and that's never been something that Guild Wars 2's tackled either. They've always just sort of looked the same. In the first game, the Krait would transform into all different kinds of forms. Yes, there were the snake-like, Naga-like, Forgotten-like versions that we see in Guild Wars 2, but also there were way more versions of Krait back in the first game, and maybe this update will tap into that somewhat. I also like the idea that they say that this is more than a weapon, it's a monument to fear. On the release page specifically, they say, hey, there's a secret. What secret lies behind the wall, they say. So we're not meant to know, but I like that line. It reminds me of the Halo line, I am a monument to all your sins from the Gravemind, which has to be one of my favourite gaming quotes of all time. So I kind of like the idea of perhaps them going back and making the Krait witch that's currently in this area, or was before the current patch, which has already started to revamp Kessex Hills, whether this this patch was going to make that into like a mega boss type thing. From this release page, I would say that is untrue. I doubt that it's going to be a mega boss at all. There's been no mention that this is content in line with anything we've saw with Gw2, and if they do go with like an open world dungeon style tower area, then we could be looking at, again, another type of content that Guild Wars 2's just not had before. We haven't had this experience yet, and instead of, you know, giving us more fractals or building on more dungeon paths and stuff, they're still exploring what they can do with this game. Of course, I could be wrong, and it could be just a very generic new dungeon type thing that we get, but hey, we'll hold off on that for a second. So the release page itself states, behind the veil, some new trouble is growing in Keswick's Hills. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that for anyone just sort of signing in. This update is affecting Keswick's Hills in Krait. There's already changes that you can see there in game. Carefully hidden by magic, the Krait have been working tirelessly on a terror unlike anything seen before in Tyria. Marjorie Delacroix and Casimir Mead are investigating the illusory curtain that's cloaking part of the Leviathan Lake, and they need your help. What secret lies behind the wall? So again, we've got these two characters, Casimir Mead and Marjorie Delacroix. Last time they were in the story, ArenaNet did like a big film noir style thing. Are they going to return to that style because they're going to be prominent characters again? I'm not particularly keen on it. I thought it was a fun, quirky little thing that they could do, but I totally wouldn't mind if we just sort of had a more similar style to what we've seen most of the Guild Wars 2's living story be told in. You know, just because these characters have returned, it doesn't mean we have to go back to a film noir style thing, but that would be very cool to see too. I genuinely enjoy both of those characters. There's a very cool short story I read on my channel quite recently about Marjorie and how she became an investigative detective, and this mystery surrounding her to do with E, that then, of course, since Marjorie is back, is another potential thing. Maybe E will stand up again, though my gut says no, because perhaps it will just be another little hint they give us at the end of the story that we're given during this patch. Also, I think it's quite nice, obviously, that these mesmers are investigating an illusory curtain that is cloaking part of Leviathan Lake. The idea here being, if you go in-game, you see that there is this barrier, but it doesn't really look like there's anything behind there. It just looks like a regular part of the lake. But the idea is this barrier is, like, hiding this massive construct that the Krait are building that is going to completely change what Keswick's Hills look like. Look at that trailer. It's going to change all of the sky, poison the entire area, corrupt everything. It looks completely different. Maybe that's a bit of a shame for some people, too, because Crichton areas are generally quite beautiful areas, and we've suddenly lost another huge chunk that's going to look, it's going to basically have it's going to be another area that's swiped with the same colour palette that we've got in all of Ore and a lot of the swamps and things that are already in Krait anyway. So we're sort of losing another more beautiful area of the game in exchange for this giant tower. But even though it looks sort of ugly on one level, I think that the scale of this thing is quite grand. It's going to be akin, like Keswick's Hills is already a cool zone because it's got the Wizard's Tower and it's got the Tengu Wall there too, and now we're going to have this other magnificent structure in the zone too. That's going to be so cool. And whether the Wizard's Tower, just because by virtue of the fact it's in the same zone, or even the Tengu Wall will have some relation here, I highly doubt. But it will mean that Keswick's Hills is very quickly becoming one of my favourite areas, like, in terms of the scenery and the things you can see. Like, there are so many prominent and unique landmarks in that zone that you just don't get anywhere else. Though the Tower of Nightmares will, of course, make Leviathan Lake look pretty damn ugly. Okay, so before I move on to specific mechanic stuff, I do want to talk to you guys about the Krait, because this is an update that seems to be very much to do with the Krait, and ArenaNet never tapped into a lot of the lore that they gave for the Krait and how cool they are. So I read one tiny portion of some of this information in a previous video. I want to teach you guys some more. So this is basically from their blog before launch. I think a lot of it will be very relevant. Most of the artwork we have of the Krait seem to be relating to giant towers and things that the Krait had built for themselves, known as obelisks. Well, no, they hadn't built for themselves. They had found the smooth black stone on the ocean floor that they came across and later attributed religious significance to. So originally from the Unending Ocean, the Krait rival even the Char for their viciousness and cruel ingenuity. These intelligent creatures are vicious and xenophobic, attacking and enslaving all other species on sight. The Unending Ocean being an area, if you look on the in-game Guild Wars 2 map, you will see like this tiny body of water that says Unending Ocean in the very bottom left-hand corner. That actually represents a huge, vast ocean, which we got to sort of see the extent of in a way in Guild Wars 1, because many miles to the south of that was one of the previous continents we could visit, and where PvP took place in the first game was on a very small island chain in the middle of that ocean. So the Krait were actually, like many other races for Guild Wars 2, like the Wagon and like the Lagos, they were a deep sea race that has been forced into new territory because of the activities of the Elder Dragons, in particular the Deep Sea Dragon. They are not minions of the Deep Sea Dragon, and they weren't necessarily influenced by him, though that is a possibility. They have just been pushed into our regions more so than ever before because of this activity. Though, having said that, again, even back during Guild Wars 1, before these Elder Dragons were really starting to wake up, we saw them in some of the more exotic locations on Tyria anyway, and they were very different back then. As I said, they could shapeshift. So, speaking of shape-shifting, let's read about their physiology. The Krait are humanoid from the waist up, with a lizard-like head with protruding horns and scaly skin, and have snake-like tails. They prefer to live underwater, where their tail allows them to be flexible and excellent swimmers, but they are equally able to live on land and are reasonably mobile there. When they come close to death, they enter a frenzy which shapeshifts them to another form. This gives them a second wind, which makes them particularly difficult to kill. And as I say, I don't think I've seen that at all in Guild Wars 2. Am I being really stupid? But like, it's such a core part of who they are, and this article even acknowledges that ArenaNet remembered that when designing Guild Wars 2, and it's just not a mechanic that they have. I think of most enemies, Krait do have notable mechanics, particularly in combat, just because of all the CC they throw down on you when you're in underwater areas. But this shapeshift thing is just not a part of Guild Wars 2, question mark? The Krait lay eggs in underwater hatcheries. When hatched, they have 3 stages of existence: the larval stage, the adolescent stage, and the mature stage. The larval stage is weak, fragile, and poor at swimming. They are guarded by their better swimmers and learn life skills. As adolescents, they are used as scouts. Mature Krait are stronger and are the steadfast fighters for which the species has gained infamy. So mostly we'll be fighting mature Krait in Guild Wars 2. There could be a few exceptions out there though. Krait are known to consume the flesh of their captive slaves, which includes humans and other air breathers. So these are enemies which eat us. There was a lot of propaganda and interesting stuff in the first game where we had this war between the Char and humans, and there were like these small bits of lore about how the humans believed that the Char would eat them. And then as the story progressed, you kind of realize this was just human propaganda, and the Char, as cruel as they are actually above basically being cannibals. It's not really cannibalism, but they're above that. The Krait are not. The Krait are flat out evil. Krait are vicious creatures, completely uninterested in the needs or well-being of others. The Krait have never felt threatened by any other land or sea-dwelling races. They believe other lesser races have nothing to offer them, so the Krait never bother to communicate with them. Never beaten, they are convinced that they are blessed and elevated, the superior species in the world. The Krait will seize whatever they want for themselves, slaves in particular, with a ruthless efficiency. So again, this is why we never really communicate with them in Guild Wars 2, and why they might appear flat, but in fact there is more to it than that. Krait structures, often titled with the words deeps, like the Stygian Deeps and the Stormwreck Deeps, stretch from ocean depths to just above the surface. This you do get to see in game. Think of the Tengu Wall, but in Caledon Forest, that body of water there. You can see that there are these wooden platforms just above the water, but you swim down and you realise that it's a really vast creation built of meshes of wood that goes all the way down to the seafloor. Their cities are often built around one or more of the great obelisks, elaborately built to incorporate coral reefs and natural caverns. The city usually contains underwater hatcheries, palatial living areas, arenas for gladiatorial combat, and long lines of glowing road markers which can be seen from the surface. Slaves are penned in small chambers at the top of the structures until it is time to be eaten or sacrificed. This top part is often built from shipwrecks or materials stolen from the land. The light from the slaves' cooking fires serve as a warning to passing ships to be wary of the Krait below. I love that idea. When I first read that, I had this very vivid image of some of the free races of the world on a boat, for example, sailing through the unending ocean. Perhaps it's a foggy day, and just in the distance they see a few lights on the surface of the water, and it just fills them with terror. And they know that they have to flee, but at the same time that there's like this great tragedy in that, because by fleeing they know that these lights actually are marking trapped people who desperately need their help. But instead of filling these races with the drive they need to save those people, instead they just leave and they flee. I love that idea. It's very dark. Krait have never developed a written language, but have excellent memories and are strong mathematicians. Both males and females are given education and battle training, and both genders perform all general societal functions. That last line there makes me think about them in terms of being a playable race. It's like, oh, you can be a male or female Krait. It doesn't matter. They both do the same stuff. And lastly, guys, I'll talk a little bit about their religion. Religion is at the heart of Krait society, and in turn, the obelisks are at the heart of Krait religion. The obelisks are rare, eerily smooth stones made from a unique material found on the ocean floor. According to the Eratus, the priesthood of the Krait, the obelisks mark the site of ascension of ancient Krait prophets to some higher realm. But land-based scholars speculate that they are simply ancient Krait monuments whose purpose have been long forgotten due to the oral nature of the Krait's religious texts. Because remember, they don't write anything. And bear in mind as I read this as well, guys, how this could impact why they're building this big tower in Keswick's Hills. Like, in particular, this next section, a Krait doctrine foretells the return of the obelisk's prophets, bringing with them massive armies to flood the surface of the world and destroy other species. It is to these prophets that the Krait sacrifice their slaves, believing they will serve the prophets as they expand into their otherworldly armies. The Krait regularly use magical and mathematical means to attempt to predict the time of the prophet's return, but have yet been successful. Is that what we're going to see? Is this in the name of bringing the prophets back? And if so, imagine if this patch ends with that actually coming to fruition, and then that guides a lot more of the living story, maybe the next couple of patches in a row. This is what I'm talking about, why I think the living story would be much stronger if they weren't out with chapters and they dedicated like 3-4 patches all to one solid story and then moved on to the next. But hey, the religion of the Krait is what allows the Eratus to control the entire race. Religious texts followed by the Krait are passed down verbally through these priests and priestesses. The vast length of the texts allow the priests, who have dedicated their lives to these texts, to make subtle changes to the wording and manipulate the interpretation of their legends to serve their purposes and support their power, which is also something I really like the idea of, particularly when you look at real life religious texts and how over the ages they were changed many times to suit people's needs, and now much of it's out of date, but because the general population can read and write now, it's a lot harder to change it in retrospect. But anyway, yeah, that's a little bit of a crash course on the Krait, guys. Hopefully that gets your imagination flowing a little bit of what we could be seeing coming. I would love to see some of this story actually come forward in Guild Wars 2, because as I say, mostly they have just been a race that we fight, and that's about it. There are another couple of things of note that ArenaNet mentioned. First of all, the Antitoxin Spray. Prepare for battle with a new universal healing skill. A dose of this cutting-edge Antitoxin Spray will cleanse yourself and nearby allies of poison, torment, confusion, and toxin. This skill is available to characters of all professions. So this is the first time we've seen ArenaNet adding new skills as a part of the living story, and just as updates in general to the game, which is something that we knew that they wanted to do. The same goes for traits and things. And if you think about it, this is the same sort of philosophy as what we saw with Fractals of the Mists. They added a new area of content for Fractals of the Mists with a unique mechanic that you countered as a part of character development, right? So you had Agony, and then you could build Agony resistance to your character. Now, with this new update, it's the same thing. They've added Toxin that is unique to this one type of content that you can counter by building into your character this new heal skill that you'll get. But because of the way they've done it, it's just a heal skill, and there's like, it's not necessarily grindy to get to or anything. I think that's pretty cool. And Toxin as well. Like, is this marking the introduction of a particularly prevalent new condition, or is it just something unique to this tower? We don't know, but it's obviously going to be starting with this tower. Also note how this Antitoxin is going to remove all damaging conditions off of you except for bleeds. So it will have some functional use even outside of this dungeon too, which makes me think it's probably a bit more better designed. And lastly, the Krait Obelisk Shard. Complete the Tower of Nightmares meta achievement to receive a Krait Obelisk Shard for your home instance, which can serve as a place of power for earning a skill point or charging quartz crystals. So this ties me into the question I want to ask you guys. This is what they're doing for the home instance. Like, it's pretty clear now. We complete metas, we get some small little thing we can interact with in our home instance. Is that enough for you guys? I'm very curious, because I still have never found even though I've done all these metas, I still have never found myself going back to the home instance, because I don't really care about those crafting mats. And if I did say I wanted celestial gear, I'm not even compelled to go into my home instance to slowly gather them up over the months and months and months so I get enough mats. Instead, I would probably just buy it on the trading post and farm for a bit. So like, I personally still haven't been to the home instance, but I do like the idea of like a year down the line, there is a butt ton of stuff all over, you know, like the home instances are quite big too. There's loads of stuff all around that you can interact with, and they are monuments, to your achievements and progress since the game's launch. So I think it's got some interesting ideas, but is it enough? And I'm curious what you guys would like to see with the home instance if you don't feel like it's enough. Now, do temper your response though, because it's very easy to say, oh, I want player housing, and, you know, ask for really big features. Be reasonable. Like, what do you think that they could add if it wasn't the focus of a Living Story update, but it was just something, you know, that we get rewarded and some reason to go back there? So I am curious. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I would love to hear your responses, and I'm excited about this update. If it really is like an open world dungeon, like a tower climbing, I'm going to be very, very excited. Thanks very much, guys. Hope you have a good one, and I will see you next time.